Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. And on this episode, we are talking with two veteran Dynamics 365 finance and operations consultants, Satish Panwar and Sukrut Parab, both with Hitachi Solutions America. We are having a discussion of some of the key planning criteria for a new project. Since so many of the D365 FO projects are now cloud-based, there are probably going to be a lot of differences that users will see compared to their last ERP project. We discuss what to expect at various project stages and how some advances in the product, like the need for fewer customizations typically, have changed project planning. Another topic that really shows the differences today are the tools that come into play, from Lifecycle Services and Azure DevOps to Microsoft Teams, Azure Service Bus, and more. We also touch on Satish and Sukrut's experiences working with the Microsoft FastTrack team, as well as the promise of F&O business event framework and other considerations when planning a go-live. All right, so I am happy to welcome Satish Panwar and Sukrut Parab to the podcast. Hey, Satish and Sukrut, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Jason, for having us.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you both here. And this is a conversation I've really been looking forward to because there's so much to possibly discuss, and maybe even a bit of a challenge to work it all into one episode here. But we'll see how we do. So both of you are I'll leave the real introductions to you, but you're both with Hitachi Solutions America, right? Why don't I leave it to both of you to introduce yourselves? Satish, do you want to go first?
So I'm Satish Panwar, and I have been with Hitachi Solutions for last 5 years. And I am a senior solution architect, and I oversee the entire projects from a solution architect perspective. I have done quite number of projects on D365, and I have been working with the product since 3.0. So we have seen different flavors of Dynamics implementation, all the way from 3.0, 4.0, 2009, 2012, and now D365.
All right, excellent. Welcome. Hey, Sukrut.
Hi. So, hi everyone. My name is Sukrut, and I'm working with Hitachi Solutions from last 5 years, mostly on the technical side, technical architectural side. I'm a Microsoft Business Application MVP. And overall, my working with the finance and operations since last 12 years, starting from 3.0 till finance and operations.
All right, excellent. And so, I mean, it's great that both of you have seen these products, have worked with these products for many years. You've seen them evolve to some extent to today, the present, I guess the present state of them, and they continue to change very rapidly. And it's interesting to me that as the products evolve, but there's always such a focus on implementation success that just never changes. That the concern, the focus on it, the expertise that's needed to really make it possible to be successful, and that's really what today's conversation is all about in the context of finance and operations, implementations, deployments. Well, to start off, I know that you had sort of 5 areas that you think are sort of at the very highest level. The way that you approach an implementation, and things I guess you would say that you maybe look at first to make sure that these are the high level areas that are in place. Does one of you want to start by maybe just outlining those, and then we'll start diving into a few of those topics in more detail?
Sure. So there are a few factors that any project needs to account for, whether it was a previous implementation of 3.0 versus whether it's a D365 implementation. These are the core criteria from a success perspective. So to start with, executive sponsorship and involvement in the project. If your executives are involved, if there is a sponsorship, if there are stakeholders that are involved in the project, the outcome probably would be successful. If they are not involved, then it's a different story altogether. You need to have appropriate budget and timeline. We have seen in some cases the timeline is not well. So if you were to look at it, the project, given the scope, the project can be executed, say for example, in 1 year, but companies kind of tend to compress it by removing things here and there, and then want to go live in 6 months. So basically, you're kind of setting yourself for failure if you're compressing your project that much and not planning it appropriately. You can always put in more resources, but then you also have to see, okay, are you having enough time for different phases of the project? Change management strategy, very important, and how that's communicated to the customer as well. It can be a change in the system, or it can also be considered, how existing roles and responsibilities, how existing employment would be impacted based on the new project that is going to take place. Always make sure that it's not an IT-driven project. We have seen in most of the cases, IT-driven projects are they lean more towards failure as against if it's a business project. So try to incorporate business into the project. Try to make sure that business is heavily engaged. There is business buy-in on the project. If there is not, try to identify what those factors are and try to get them aligned. Because we have seen in certain cases, IT started the project, there is no business buy-in. You can keep hitting, you'll keep hitting roadblocks after roadblock, and you can't just get out of it because business is not cooperating you. Ultimately, business is the one that's going to give you all the requirements. They are the one who is going to test. So always involve business, and then it all comes with planning. So if the planning is right, how you are going to structure your project, considering your stakeholder change management strategy, budget, business involvement, and so on. So I'll leave this at a high level. These are some of the factors that are very crucial for any successful implementation.
And how does a methodology get selected on any given project? Is it based on the customer's preferences? Is it based on like your implementation team's expertise and what you bring from the company?
I think it's mostly based on partner as well as the methodology that Microsoft is kind of bringing to the table. So Microsoft will let partner manages the project, but they kind of provide you the guidance. And if you look at any project, and irrespective of the methodology, basically there are a few things that you need to do. You need to make sure that you gather the requirements, you kind of build on top of it, you deploy it, and ultimately you go live. But in terms of methodology, I'll say there are two that are very famous. As we all know, there is waterfall and agile. But what we have tend to see is it's more of a hybrid approach that kind of works. If you leave it just to waterfall, there seems to be certain issues. But agile methodology provides some benefits. So we kind of start with waterfall methodology, wherein you kind of do your requirements. But when it comes to design and develop, that's where you switch to agile methodology. So I'll say, as long as it's clearly planned and agreed upon by partner and customer, that's very important in beginning of the project.
That's pretty interesting. The idea of sort of switching between kind of a hybrid model where you're changing the approach based on the phase and what it calls for. Well, what's next? Once you've sort of chosen the methodology, what are some of the other factors that you're trying to get your clients to agree to next or to plan for next?
So what we typically want to do during the initiation phase, we want to make sure that customer understand how this project is going to get executed over a time period. During the initiation phase, you typically go with business requirements, right? How you go about business requirements. We have seen in certain scenarios wherein either partners come with predefined templates from a requirement gathering perspective. In some cases, we have seen consultants starting with a blank slate. It's like, tell me what it is, but I think the world is now changing. Now, for implementation to be successful, partners tend to bring in, hey, this is what our expertise is, this is what we do on a daily basis. So they come with their own tool set, as well as different ways of doing a business requirement. It's very important that all the business requirements, there are multiple workshops that are happening during initiation phase, and at that time, again, going back to the basics, make sure your business is involved. So you set up, so depending upon what, how your project is planned, how many modules are you using from an implementation perspective, bring in group of users and have an open dialogue with them based on what their requirements are, what their pain points are. In some cases, we see, everything seems to be okay, but it's just so painful for customer. They have to employ, say, for example, from an order entry perspective, the integrations are not there. We have seen wherein, the order get placed on e-commerce, the integration, if customer have chosen at some point, either the integrations were not working, they tend to do data entry manually in some cases. Which can be really simplified. So try to get into the pain points, try to get into the requirements, and make sure that it's a list that is easily accessible to the customers as well as the partners, and that list gets agreed upon at some point, depending upon your phase, before you start working into the next set of next project phase, which is your design and develop. So, clear-cut defined set of requirements, you agree upon it, you go through gap fit analysis, you always want to make sure, what's out of the box. Try to enforce, standard processes that D365 comes with. We have seen it used to be customized very heavily in previous versions. With D365, there are less customizations. And the reason for those less customization is because there is so much to offer in the product, and Microsoft keep on adding more and more functionalities that you can serve your customers with.
That was going to be my next question. Was the debate or the need for customization? Do you find that you're able to do that you need to do? Is what you're saying that you find that most clients need fewer customizations today than they would have with the previous version?
I would agree with that statement. Yeah. And the reason is there is so much that Microsoft is investing in the product right now. It has come a long way. Given that, Sukrut and I, we both have worked with previous versions. New functionalities tend to come out, but tend to come out in years in some cases. I don't think there was the focus that Microsoft currently have on finance and operations and even the Dynamics family. It's tightly integrated with other Dynamics products. Microsoft is just trying to give one flavor to all Dynamics families. There are new features and functionalities. I think right now there are 8 updates, platform updates or releases that happens for finance and operations in a given year. Release plan are there by Microsoft. They publish it, in advance so that customers know what exactly is coming in future. An example of it is, recently Microsoft announced that they will come up with the small partial shipping feature in some time. There used to be few other things, you used to connect with ISVs, but now, given that those release notes are there, if there are implementations that are in progress right now, at least they know that something is coming from Microsoft. That's where release notes are helping them. Then there are different programs, there's a PEEP program wherein you can have a preview access of the new features and functionalities before even it's generally available. So it's completely changing. Plus, the modifications, to be very frank, the previous versions of AX, you could do anything with the product. You can get into the product, you can remove the standard code and do whatever you needed to do. When Microsoft went into the SaaS model, at that time, there was a choice to be made. It's like, do we continue to allow customers and partners to abuse the system in some cases, to be very frank. But so, there is concept, earlier it used to be concept of overlaying, now it's concept of extension. So it has completely changed, and Microsoft have made, I won't say that have made things more difficult, but I'll say have given a thought and is forcing customers and partners to think out of the box and see what you can do with the product, rather than just go ahead and modify it to whatever you need.
When it comes to a difference with like the release notes that come out and the multiple waves of updates per year and the eight platform updates per year, is that something that organizations understand when you explain that to them, or does that take some adjustment? Because I imagine, well, two factors. One is just the knowledge and the learning of the changes and the updates on a frequent basis, but also as you go, you can tell me this, but as you go through the beginning of an implementation, you have to expect that you have to expect that even like the sandboxes that you're working on, you'll want to apply some of these updates, over the timeline of the project, right?
Yes, that is very important, and this has to be so while planning, this is also very important, to make customer aware of what's Microsoft vision is about, and their plan is about releasing these updates, and it is very important from customer perspective as well, to get these updates frequently, because the way Microsoft designed the support plan for finance and operation now, you have to be at least, on the latest or latest -1 update in order to get a better support for your implementations. So making customers aware about all these update, platform update and application updates, planning, release schedule is very important.
What we tend to do during the initiation phase, typically, something like this has already been covered in pre-sales engagement. But just to make sure that it's not only the management team that may have made the decision on, let's go with SaaS solution. We want to make sure that the customer project team understand the release process. What is Microsoft doing? So it's very important to make sure they understand, number one, and then when the project plan are being done, at that time there is time and budget specifically dedicated for environment upgrades, and there is all this environment strategy that kind of comes in, and these releases definitely have an impact on the overall environment strategy as well as the cost and the execution timeline.
Is it a big adjustment for the teams to adapt to that?
We haven't seen so. It's initially it's a shock in some cases, depending upon how structured the customer is. So I've been to one customer, and we started with D365 implementation, and they use previous version of D365. So these guys, what they do today is they have access to SQL. They ran into issues. Guess what? They go right into the SQL and fix transactions. With SaaS solution, there is no access to SQL database to begin with, and this is one of the challenge that if customers have a bad practice, that you need to start breaking those bad practices and get them aligned with, okay, on a go forward basis, you should not have anything breaking in your production environment, because that's how you plan it. That's why planning is necessary. You want to make sure whatever you are pushing into your production environment has been tested X number of times prior to you pushing in production. You don't just push things in production and then, we'll deal with it in production. Gone are the days from that standpoint. You used to be able to do that in previous version. Now you just cannot. And you should not have even done it on the previous version. But now Microsoft is kind of forcing you that you better plan it well, you better test it. They are giving you the tool set, they are giving you the methodologies, they are giving you the resources, they are making you aware of, these are the limitations that you wouldn't be able to do fixes right away. So get over it and come to the world of SaaS solution.
Well, let's talk a little more about some of those tools that you just mentioned. One of the ones that I always think of is LCS. It's been around since even before D365, I believe. For me, I was very excited about when it first launched, and it's still I know very important, but I have to admit it seems like it's maybe stabilized, or it has become more common, perhaps.
Right. So just to start with, for the listeners who are not aware of the LCS, it's nothing but a lifecycle services, which is basically used for all the application lifecycle management. It's a part of application lifecycle management, and it's mandatory for each and every finance and operation projects. And you're true, you're correct, Jason. It exists for AX 2012 as well. So without no implementation can start without LCS. So as soon as customer sign-ups for the finance and operation licenses, the first step they would do is start with the LCS, invite their team in LCS, project team in LCS, make sure they have the team has proper access to everything. So LCS is basically a starting point for everything, whether you consider it as your environment planning, deployments, recording business processes, anything. So, and along with that, the most important thing which plays a crucial role in your implementation is Azure DevOps. Which is formerly known as Visual Studio Team Services, VSTS. So the combination of LCS and Azure DevOps plays a very important role in any implementation. Of course, you can use different toolings. It's up to the customer or partner if they want to use along with this LCS and Azure DevOps, different tools to make their implementation successful. But to start with, the tight integration between LCS and Azure DevOps is provided by Microsoft, in order for customers or partners to handle their projects or manage their entire application ALM processes.
So that's a skill. Those are areas that if you're a F&O customer, if your own internal like IT or development teams aren't familiar with or working with Azure DevOps, that's an area that they should expect to have to either look to their partner to help them with, or to develop expertise themselves for the long term.
Right, and yes, and of course, for the new of course, partner can help, to train customers with this new LCS, what you can do with LCS and Azure DevOps. And there is there are so many things you can do with LCS and DevOps. If we deep dive, maybe an hour is not sufficient for that. But as I said earlier, during planning, environment planning, managing your business processes, recording those within Azure DevOps, and project management, those kind of things can be done using these things. And definitely partners can help, to train customers. So they have to invest little time and budget, if they are not aware of all these things, LCS and Azure DevOps. So they have to invest some time. Yeah.
Any other tools you would mention as things that organizations should expect to be using?
From that standpoint, I would say, there are tools that are kind of evergreen that we have been using for so long. OneNote is definitely one of them. It allows you to do collaboration right away. If you are taking notes, say for example, your meeting notes, etc., everything can be kind of collaborated in OneNote. Everything is in cloud. You can access it via OneNote app, and multiple users can take notes at the same time. It's all in the cloud. Everybody can access to it. So your customers can have access to your OneNote book. So they know what exactly is going in detail. Other ever-growing tools are, I'll say, Excel, Word, Microsoft Project Plan, uh, PowerPoint. We have been using all them.
In addition to what Satish mentioned, along with this LCS and Azure DevOps now, the things like Microsoft Teams, right? Because of all these are cloud-based solutions, these tools, like for example, I'll say example of Teams, these tools can be easily integrated in Azure DevOps, wherein you can get, within Azure DevOps, you can do certain things like generating builds for you, which you are going to deploy in your UAT production environments. So if you can notify you within your teams, you can integrate Microsoft Team with your Azure DevOps. You can integrate there are some already built-in connectors which are provided. You can configure those and start flowing those notifications so different kind of LLM processing. This is just one example, but these kind of tooling you can use. So there are some good connectors, and everything is provided by Microsoft, and they are heavily investing in those which you can utilize along with LCS and Azure DevOps in order to make your processes more you can automate those processes and notify your team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine Teams is also extremely helpful today for just ongoing project communications in a way that, I don't know, previous tools maybe weren't as seems to offer capabilities that older tools did not when it comes to remote collaboration.
Right, and you can utilize in your projects as well you can have a separate, if for example, if you take example of, because we are taking example of Teams, you can have a separate channel just to notify about the deployments, right, to the team.
What we've also seen, Jason, as far as Team is concerned, I think Teams is a big tool set in itself, and it seems to be replacing a lot of discussions that used to happen one-on-one in emails or in on a distribution list. So on a go-forward basis, if I need something, and rather than sending an email to individual, copying 10 different folks just so that they are aware of it, it's like project has a team, just go put in the message, you can tag, if it's for everybody, if it's for a specific individual, you can just tag in there. Others know what exactly is going on. Earlier it used to be, I'll take an update from someone and then I'll summarize and then send it. Right now it's all collaboration. It is kind of replacing Outlook. The traffic to Outlook is definitely much less, and the benefit that Teams provide over Outlook is, Outlook is my personal. If somebody were to join the team tomorrow, they basically have no idea of what exactly happened in the project. The moment they get added to Teams, they can just scroll up and all the history is there. Whatever discussions, whatever decisions, inquiries might have happened on the project, everything is right there available to them, irrespective of when they are starting with it.
Right, and another example I would like to share with is recently I was demoing one of the customers about the RSAT tool, and of course, even if we show them everything live, it's not necessarily that every user understands it at the same time, right, when I'm presenting. So advantage of this kind of tooling using Teams and all is, like, internally we set up a meeting, start recording those, and those can be referred by those users later point. For example, one of the users said me that whatever you presented while presenting the regression suite automation tool, he watched that video a couple of times, and that helped him to understand. So this kind of tooling is definitely helpful in your implementation projects, where you can record certain things so that you don't have to repeat those things again and again, and user can refer to those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really interesting. It's probably, again, another topic that we could probably dive into in a whole lot more detail down the line. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about data migration. I know that's a big part of a lot of projects, and it's, I imagine, it's relevant whether it's a company that's moving to F&O from AX or perhaps from another ERP or another set of solutions that they use to run their finances or to run their operations. How big a part is data migration in a typical project?
I'll say data migration is like other specific topics. Data migration is one of the important discussion point strategy you need to finalize before you can even embark on the project journey. So typically, what happens is during the initiation phase, is we want to make sure that our customer understand what data migration strategy is, what data governance strategy is. And during the data migration strategy, you tend to kind of finalize, hey, this is what the scope of the project is. This is what you are going to do. You tend to get into the volumes. You tend to see how you are going to manage your data migration over a time period. We have seen instances wherein, if you don't plan it, somebody pointed recently, customer forgot to give additional 50,000 customers that need to be ported to production environment right before production environment cutover. So if, why was this not surfaced in the beginning of the project? You need to plan what are the tools that you are going to use. If you are going to use ETL, what it is, what is your scrubbing, data scrubbing mechanism? How are you going to validate the data? Because what happens is you don't want to kind of come with a strategy. Hey, we'll start data migration and then we'll come up with, this is how we'll test it, etc. You want to kind of lay it upfront so that your customer understand and you don't get bogged down by customer over a time period. Hey, what exactly is when are we refreshing our environments? Are we going to do data migration just before UAT, or when exactly are we going to do it? What are we covering in X iterations? How many iterations are we going to do? By iteration, what I mean is how many times are we going to do data migration? Does customer understand what is parameter data versus master data versus reference data or transactional data? We tend to make sure that customer understand all these concepts before we embark on a long journey of the project, and this typically happens during the the initiation phase of the project.
And I imagine you have to measure, from your perspective, you have to measure what level of expertise this team has in terms of their knowledge and their ability to plan this with you versus perhaps needing some education.
That is correct. What we typically tend to do is in the data migration strategy in the beginning, we try to take them through a simple example of, say, for example, first of all, Microsoft provides a great tool set in terms of data management workspace, through which you do your data migration. But customer, when they start their journey, have no idea about what are the tools, what is the mechanism, how are we going to do it. What we typically tend to do is try to pick up a simple data migration scope item. So say, for example, it's customers, and try to show, hey, you will come up with, you will provide us data. This is what the format is, and you try to show them, hey, this is how we got the format out of D365. This is where you will be providing the data, and once you provide the data, we load it in. In some cases we have predefined templates which are already populated with data, so that customer can see, okay, the data is now in Excel or CSV or whatever other mechanism you are using, and then you run your tool set right there during that data migration strategy. And then they can see how data is getting populated. It kind of gives them a vision. It's always helpful to see how something is being done so that they understand what the entire process is kind of looks like.
Okay, so beyond data migration, can you just tell me some of the other high-level, important areas that go into executing a successful D365 project, and then maybe we can dive into one or two more.
Sure. So just at a high level, ALM is very important, and by ALM I mean application lifecycle management, and that basically pertains to when the application is starting to get used till the time the application is no longer get used. But I think with SaaS applications, customer will be using these applications forever. That's what the Microsoft vision is, and that's what I think customer wants to do as well. Testing strategy, very important for an implementation. Environment strategy, how many environments you are going to have, and during which phase those environments need to spin up so that you can kind of control the cost. Another thing that comes to mind is your BI or analytics, your reporting strategy. Don't leave it until the end. Start factoring in much earlier in the project, rather than designing the whole system and thinking we'll deal with the reporting requirements later on. Because if you know that your reporting requirements, you kind of tend to design the system that way. Integrations, very heavy, and the cloud system had made it a little bit more difficult what it used to be. But there are so many different strategies that are available for integrations. Security is another one, which is very big. You definitely want to make sure your security is all set up right, in terms of your users, when they test it, with what security they test. And towards the end, I'll say, it all boils down to user training, cutover plan, and your production planning. When are you going to go live, and what all you need to do before you switch your environments to production. So there is a lot more, but I think at a high level these should kind of suffice.
When it comes to, say, integration, you said something that I thought was interesting. You mentioned that a cloud-based solution, maybe if I understood you right, that it has its own challenges. Are there things that maybe organizations don't expect when they plan for the integrations they're going to need for F&O as a public cloud service?
Sure. Yeah. So definitely, it's with the finance and operation release, it's little difficult because everything is in cloud. It's very difficult. It's little difficult to integrate some of the applications, or you have to plan your processes according to the new ways, provide new strategies. Instead of saying ways, I'll say new strategies which are provided to integrate with the finance and operations. And there are different strategies. There are, depending on your scenario and what you want to use, you can choose between those toolings. So for example, with the finance and operation release, they introduced OData, which is out of the box. The data management framework provides your data entities, which can be used to integrate any other external application with finance and operations. Apart from the data management framework, they still support custom services, which are there in the old versions as well. So if you have any processes designed using those, you can still continue using those custom services using those. And with the cloud version now, the entire Azure stack is open for you. For example, now the and Azure Stack as well as the Power Platform, right? That is the most important thing, is open for you to integrate finance and operations with external systems. So you can utilize, for example, the new concept called as business events they introduced, wherein you can just notify external systems and utilize logic apps or flow. And you can use also from the Azure Stack perspective, you can utilize Service Bus or event grids, to integrate with finance and operations. So it's there are different toolings available and strategies are there, and there is a very good article on provided by Microsoft as well on the doc side, where how to choose the integration strategy when you are designing your integrations.
And as I understand it, you mentioned business events. is that one of the newer models that has emerged? And it's, from what I've heard, it seems to be sort of growing in importance. And I know it's not something we can go into in too much detail on this podcast episode, but what else can you say about the importance of it?
Yeah, of course, business events are very important, and it's very recent. I would say not very recent, but probably maybe a year ago they started. They released this feature. Of course, the feature is really great. It's not for for any heavy integrations. People misassume the use of business events sometimes, but the business, the main reason or the main use of business event is basically just making sure the external system knows what is happened within finance and operations. It's not for any data data import or for any heavy integration users. It's just notifying the external system, okay, this thing is done within the finance and operations, and you can perform based on that, you can perform next task. So that I can say at a very high level. The topic is very vast in terms of how the security is going to work and what else can be done, how it can be consumed within flow using service bus and different endpoints using custom HTTP endpoints and all those things. But I would say at very high level, it's just for communicating different system with the finance and operations, and perform different action based on what happened within finance and operations.
Yeah, interesting. It's a from my perspective, it seems to have a lot. There seems to be a lot of people interested in that. That's why I wanted to just at least mention it as something sort of newer and having some interest. Let's maybe conclude with some of the things that go on for planning the go live. You mentioned Satish. I think you mentioned having a cutover plan, and then there's also when you're planning for go live, there's also FastTrack, right? Do you want to maybe talk a little about the role that FastTrack's having?
Sure. So, FastTrack, basically, Microsoft is committing to your success. Microsoft is helping you become successful. They want to make sure that customers are getting value out of the implementation as early as possible. You don't have to wait for 2 years project to realize some value out of the project. So they kind of help you guide, this is how your implementation can be successful. So Microsoft designed this program called FastTrack, and they have two different versions of FastTrack program. Rules have recently changed, so I think if you have more than 300,000 in revenue from Dynamics products, and again, I won't go into licensing and what all Dynamics products are covered within this. But if you meet a certain threshold, you get assigned a FastTrack solution architect from Microsoft side that helps you guide and kind of provide certain checkpoints. Ultimately, it's partner responsibility, but FastTrack solution architect will make sure that you are doing things right. And some of which we already talked about. So they will have different workshops that will happen from time to time. They'll make sure that there is a solution blueprint, which will cover data migration, which will cover integrations. What are the volumes? They do have a lot of material that they provide to you, and keep on giving you the guidance that a partner or in some cases customer may be missing. So it's a good checkpoint to have, and definitely utilize the FastTrack solution architect if you can. Then there is another version of FastTrack, which is the basic program, which is the team does a lot of tech talks that are given to you. They do provide you templates. They do have a checkpoint. They want to make sure that you have done your enough testing. So there is not a dedicated FastTrack solution architect assigned to you, but there is a group that's behind the scenes that interact with you to make sure that before, say for example, you are given a production environment, you prove to them that user acceptance testing have been done, it was successful. You have already done your performance testing. So it's really helpful, and we see, in some cases it's helpful for partners to kind of emphasize to their customers why you need to do things in a certain way. Some customers may not understand it. That's where partner is one side of it. Microsoft definitely also steps in through FastTrack program.
Yeah, that's interesting. I imagine that must, in some situations, give you as the partner organization some good backup about or reinforce some of the things that you're probably trying to make sure that the customer understands, to have Microsoft stating, these are the conditions we need to meet for cut over to live and for maintaining a good production system.
That is correct. Plus, it also keeps, I will say, it's not only that the customer kind of gets checked in place, but partners also tend to be planning it more carefully, because they know that if they don't do certain things, Microsoft is not going to give you production environment. So it kind of is helping partners as well, so that they can plan more from a budget timeline perspective. So I'll say it's a good ecosystem to have in place. Earlier, it used to be just customer and partner, but now with Microsoft coming in and helping you with these implementations, again, they provide you oversight. They are not the one who is going to do it for you. It's the customer and partner who need to do it. But it's good to have those checks and balances in place via FastTrack.
Excellent. Well, I think we're going to start to wrap it up there. I mean, obviously, as we said earlier, there's just so many things that we perhaps touched on that we could get into so much more detail on. And I hope we can do that soon, that we can pick maybe some more of these smaller, more detailed subjects and talk about them again. So, Satish and Sukrut, thank you both so much for taking the time today. Satish, in addition, I have really been enjoying the articles you've been writing for our readers, and they've been getting a really good response. So, thank you just once again for those as well.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity, Jason.
Thanks for having us, Jason. Yeah.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks to Satish Panwar and Sukrut Parab for taking the time today. Also, please do check out Satish's writing on MSDW. He's written a range of great articles looking at different elements of D365 finance and operations. If you have any feedback, you can get in touch with me, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.